One thing that's always a hot topic in the League of Legends universe is the idea of champion win rates, usually being the primary factor in determining champions that are good and ones that aren't so good. Players love seeing which champions have the highest win rates and which ones are going to drastically change the metagame. But the reality is that win rates aren't actually everything in the game, and there's a lot of factors that influence what champions are good or bad, even if the numbers may say otherwise. This video will break down exactly how champion win rates don't mean everything. Quick reminder that only 4% of my audience is actually subbed, so if you could hit the button for me, that would help a ton. But onto the video. Alright, so some quick League of Legends monkey math. If a champion's win rate is high, then generally speaking, players will think that the champion is strong, right? Well, yes, that's true. More likely than not, a high win rate on a champion does generally indicate that there's something about the champion that's allowing them to be at that high win rate and be in the metagame. However, as with most things in League, there will be exceptions to the rule. There's a reason why Riot has their own champion balance framework, with many conditions at varying levels of play being able to give a better idea as to whether or not a champion should be buffed or nerfed. Let's take a look at some examples. If we take a champion like Seraphine, sitting at a 53% plus win rate historically, any player in the current metagame will think that it's absolutely disgusting and deserves to be nerfed. Even at 48-49% win rate, this champion seems pretty busted. However, we take a look at Fiddlesticks, who consistently sits at around the same win rates in every patch, but no one really cares. The same issues can occur with champions that have low win rates as well. No one bats an eye to Shyvana, who's currently sitting at a 47% win rate, but there are champions like Lucian, Akali, Orianna, or Samira that are borderline broken, sitting at the exact same win rate. It's a bit of a weird dynamic now, isn't it? If these champions are sitting at the same win rates, what dictates their ability to be a part of the meta? Why do some champions have such insane presence in high elo and professional play, when these teams and players could just pick champions with higher win rates? Wouldn't it just make more sense, since statistically speaking, it's true? The answer is more complicated and lies behind the numbers. There's a lot of things that dictate how or why a champion can be good in a certain state of the game, and that's part of the reason that League can be subjected to an ever-changing metagame, which makes it so much more interesting. I think a great way to get a baseline understanding of how champions will swing in and out of the meta is to understand the concept of champion identity, and how certain win conditions in the current metagame will influence the best champions. Champion identity is the idea of understanding a champion's purpose, both in their played role, but also in a vacuum, and how their kit and the way they play the game will be advantageous. This, of course, is subject to an extreme amount of different factors, like important objectives in the current game state, the influence of gold, importance of having strong lanes and being able to move around or impact the map, or just straight up having high numbers to override some of these other rules. Let's take an example with Jinx. Jinx's identity as a champion is to scale up to be an excellent front-to-back team fighter, and serve as a hyper carry for her team as she gets items, oftentimes having herself present a win condition for her team. Let's contrast that with Kai'Sa, who thrives in dominating the laning phase, and while also can be a win con for her teams, often succeeds by being a backline diver and destroying teams from the inside out. Historically speaking, Jinx has had a higher win rate than Kai'Sa in most metagames, but Kai'Sa has had way more presence in higher elo and in professional play overall. This is because most metagames have favored Kai'Sa's champion identity and has higher upside when presented in a highly coordinated environment. Champions can also be brought into the meta due to changing needs within the space. Since backline dive champions are pretty present in the current metagame, with a lot of champions going straight for squishy AD carries and such, we've seen a resurgence of Xayah in professional play. While often paired with Rakan to make for a nasty duo historically, Xayah herself also has a champion identity. She's well defined by her ultimate, making her an extremely stable AD carry to have in teamfights, and her self-peel gives her a ton of leverage against these backline dive comps. That's why we've seen a lot of times this season where we see the Xayah come out as a counter pick to a potential early Kai'Sa pick in spite of her 47% win rate. While win rates are decent indicators, they aren't as important as being able to counter certain styles or plays the enemy can make. Win rates are also defined as the average win rate in all scenarios, where the reality is champions are going to have a higher probability of winning when picked in a favorable scenario. When picked to counter an enemy dive comp, a 47% win rate Xayah can honestly be seen more as a 50 to 55% win rate champion. This is why draft is such an important concept in League of Legends, and it's hard to just judge teams based on knowledge you have from solo queue, because it's completely different. But even in solo queue, this dynamic between certain champions can still occur. Let's go back to Fiddlesticks. Why does Fiddlesticks succeed so much in solo queue in spite of having such a low play rate? If he was that good, why wouldn't people play him? Part of the reason could honestly be that people just don't like playing him, which is quite valid actually. But another more important reason for this case is again because of the identity of the champion and how that thrives in solo queue. Solo queue is an environment where there's generally going to be a low amount of coordination, all things considered, and there's a lot of variance for random mistakes to be made from every player. One common thing that occurs because of the lack of coordination is that junglers are not going to be punished as hard as they could be in solo queue, because making plays in the enemy jungle requires a high amount of coordination and proper setup. The kind of coordination that doesn't really exist in ranked. Let's parallel that to Fiddlesticks's champion identity, being defined as a super farm champion, with low presence in the early game, but is extremely efficient with gold and absolutely demolishes teams in the team fighting phase. In a solo queue environment, he's generally going to be able to farm and meet his win condition, with most players not doing anything to respond to him until it's already too late. However, it still sees no presence in professional play because this is the kind of playstyle that's exactly going to get destroyed against coordinated teams. Another classic example here is Sona. Sona's always sat in top 10 win rates for champions in solo queue, but has only ever seen presence in pro play as a cheese strategy, with things like Sona Taric coming to mind. In solo queue, most players will dodge a Sona on sight because the champ is just so useless for so long and can solo lose games by herself. Why is this the case? Sona's identity as a hard scaling support who can provide an extreme amount of value to her team given that she can stabilize in the early game. Many Sona players will be gaining a lot of stats through her auras and can automatically win teams not because the Sona is playing well, but more so because the enemy team is not punishing her hard enough. In a competitive environment, Sona may as well have less than a 40% win rate because teams are just going to properly have the tools to shut her down, and more often than not, she does not fill the requirements of what a good support champion needs to do right now. But Quatch, what about Seraphine? She's basically just another Sona, and she's dominating the meta. Good observation. This is a perfect example of where numbers can just override over other rules and can present new win conditions in the game. Unlike Sona, Seraphine's kit is extremely gravitating and scales so extremely hard that she can outvalue teams with her builds. She's been getting nerfed recently, and paired with some Moonstone nerfs, she has been falling off, but the fact that she has a bad early game and can gravitate the entire game around her, it's crazy. In order to succeed, good champions are generally those who are overtuned, fit the meta clearly, have a lot of winning matchups, or are a great value add to the team, present a potential counter to an enemy comp, and have good consistency. Not all of these things are mandatory, but usually a good combination of them will be. If you're somewhat confused right now, don't worry. Researching things like champion win rates and demands of the meta are actually extremely complicated concepts, and there's a reason why pro league teams and players do so much research on this topic to get the biggest edge they could possibly can. The one thing that should be obvious now though is that champion win rates are not the biggest reason to play a champion, and there's actually so much more to it than meets the eye. So instead of just learning the highest win rate champ on u.gg and spamming it, I'd highly recommend thinking about why certain champions that are picked may or may not be good, and how by understanding the identity of these champions, you can apply this concept in your own game to find new paths to victory. Hope this video helped you out though, and I will see you in the next one. Stay fresh.